and welcome to Theodore Roosevelt National Park. My name is Ranger Joe. I'm an education ranger, and my job is to teach people about our national parks. This park is dedicated to the life and passions of our 26th president, Theodore Roosevelt. However, it has little to do with his time as our nation's leader. In fact, this park is located in western North Dakota, thousands of miles from where Theodore Roosevelt grew up in New York City and where he served as president in Washington, D.C. Theodore Roosevelt was a fascinating man, and his time in North Dakota was only a small part of a very interesting life. And so I invite you to join me as we take a trip over land and through time to try to discover who TR really was. Along the way, we'll learn more about this interesting country known as the Badlands, and we'll try to solve the mystery of Theodore Roosevelt's words when he said, "I never would have been president if not for my time in North Dakota." This cabin behind me is the oldest building that we have at Theodore Roosevelt National Park, so I thought it would be a good place for us to start. So join me as we explore inside of the cabin. We'll see if we can find anything interesting. Wow. During Theodore Roosevelt's time period, North Dakota was still a part of the American frontier, meaning it was mostly natural space. There weren't any large cities or roads for people to move around very much. And so they needed a lot more basic necessities in their homes than we would have today. And in fact, those North Dakota winters can get pretty cold, and I think they would need a good way to heat their homes. And this stove would definitely be what they would have used. But the Badlands, they don't have a lot of trees out here, so they must have used something. I think this is our answer. The Badlands have a very special type of coal. It's called lignite. You can find this in seams out in the buttes and the formations of the Badlands. And ranchers and cowboys would have just gone and dug for it right out of the ground and taken it back into their homes to help them keep warm. You know, I just remembered something else about Theodore Roosevelt. He loved books. In fact, this old bookshelf here filled with these novels on history and wildlife and nature would have been the perfect entertainment for him if he was out here in North Dakota. But he wasn't just an avid reader. He was also a prolific writer. Theodore Roosevelt wrote more books than any president before or since, and this writing desk would have been the perfect place for him to pen some of those novels that he was so famous for. Let's keep looking around the cabin to see if we can find any more clues. Oh, wow. This is a neat old kitchen. There's a stove here, kind of like the other one that we saw in the first room. Obviously, this one was designed for cooking, but it was probably fed by coal, like the first one we saw. There's lots of kitchen appliances in here, like coffee grinder, waffle iron, things for making biscuits, and frying pans for other foods. There's a lot of nice things in here. I'm getting the impression that this wasn't just a normal frontier cabin. It looks a little more higher class. Typically, cabins of that day only had one room with a dirt floor. So the fact that these have different rooms and partitions, wooden floors, all these nice appliances and equipment tells me that maybe somebody special used to live here. Let's keep exploring. We have one more room to check out. Wow, a private bedroom. This cabin was definitely high class for its day. A lot of times, people just slept on the floor, or if they did have a bed, it was in a corner of their one-room cabin, not tucked into its own cozy quarters like this. Oh, wow! Another clue. This travel trunk has the letters TR on it. TR, like Theodore Roosevelt. I bet this used to belong to him. And if he brought a big trunk like this all the way from New York, I bet I know how he got here. In the 1800s, for someone to go from New York City to the Dakota Territory would have been a long and difficult journey. But by 1880, there was a railroad built connecting the great eastern cities with the western frontier. So I bet it only would have taken Theodore Roosevelt a few days to get out here, but he still would have needed traveling supplies and extra clothes for his luggage, so he probably used a travel trunk, maybe even this exact one. But if he came out here on a trip, he had to have some kind of purpose. So, I think our last clue is in the corner of the cabin behind this trunk. There's an old rifle back here, but it looks like an antique, so I'm going to make sure I put my special gloves on so I don't damage it at all. Oh, wow. This is an old Winchester model rifle from the 1880s. I bet Theodore Roosevelt used a gun just like this. If he brought a gun with him to the Dakota Territory, it was probably to hunt. Theodore Roosevelt was a very avid outdoorsman, and he loved spending time in nature, and he loved hunting. If he came to the Badlands on a hunting trip, though, I wonder what he was here to hunt. To solve that mystery, I think we're going to need to leave the cabin and go out into the national park, learn a little bit about the habitats and the animals that we can find here. So make sure you have your boots on. It's time for us to have an adventure, just like TR did. Theodore Roosevelt National Park is found in the western part of North Dakota, called the Badlands, a name given to it by Native Americans, French traders, and early western pioneers of the new United States. It is a broken country, filled with strange geologic formations, steep ravines, and little water. All of the water sources here lead to the Little Missouri River, which winds its way through the buttes and formations of western North Dakota. Sculpted by the river, rain, and wind, the Badlands were an opportunity for a young Theodore Roosevelt to enjoy the western frontier at a time when it was still a wild place, sparsely populated by humans. Surrounding the buttes and coulees of the Badlands are vast, rolling prairies. These prairies provide habitat for many plants and animals, from small insects and birds to the great American bison. The western frontier was home to numerous large game animals, and it is likely Theodore Roosevelt came to North Dakota to hunt these animals, which were not found near his native New York. However, bison were quickly disappearing from the American landscape in the 1880s due to extreme overhunting. If TR came to hunt bison, it is likely there were not many left in North Dakota. But as the bison disappeared, many people saw the North Dakota prairies as an ideal place to raise cattle, and the frontier started to change into ranching country. Today, towns and cities dot the landscape of North Dakota. Fields are sectioned off with fences, and industry has found its way onto the prairie. However, Theodore Roosevelt National Park protects a small area of the Badlands, preserving the landscape much as our future president would have seen on his trip in the 1880s. So the wildlife and the scenery found here are definitely worthy of a national park, but I'm still not sure why it's named after Theodore Roosevelt. It's pretty clear that he came to the Badlands, but there must be something more. So I think we should return to the cabin and look for other clues to TR's time in North Dakota. Whoa. What's happening? Oh. It feels so strange. Oh, Mr. Roosevelt.
Hello, Ranger.
Oh, it's very interesting to meet you here.
It's a delight to see you here in my cabin. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, sir. How are you?
Fine as toes hair.
Excellent. Well, maybe you can help me out.
Please, be happy to.
I was here looking around the cabin earlier and out exploring the park, and I was wondering why there's a national park here in North Dakota named after you.
Well, of course, my life and legacy are closely associated with the state of North Dakota. I first came here in the fall of 1883 to hunt the bison. But I was so impressed with life here in the Badlands. The free-range cattle business was all the rage at the time, so I purchased the operations of the Chimney Butte Ranch. We use the Maltese Cross brand. And of course, I eventually came back in 1884 and established my second ranch, the Elkhorn Ranch along the Little Missouri River, and some call it the cradle of conservation.
But Mr. Roosevelt, I've heard you referred to as our conservationist president. How can you be a hunter and a conservationist?
Oh, there's no contradiction whatsoever. The great hunters are truly conservationists. They help protect the game by providing habitat and, of course, assisting to make sure that the species is propagated, that the great mammals of the northern plains have remained is due in great part to the work of the hunter, who is also, when done properly, a conservationist.
You said you didn't come just to hunt. You were also a rancher here in North Dakota. Tell me a little bit about that.
It was during my time here as a rancher that I saw that much of the western game had been decimated, much of its habitat laid to ruin. And so, along with men like George Bird Grinnell, I helped to found Boone and Crockett, the nation's first fair hunting and conservation organization.
It's a very noble effort to make sure that future generations are able to enjoy the same things that you were able to enjoy out here in North Dakota. Well, Mr. Roosevelt, it sounds like that you certainly left an impression on the Badlands.
Oh, and how the Badlands and the Dakota Territory left an impression on me. I visited in 1910 in Fargo, and I said I would have never been president but for my experiences in North Dakota. And of course, it was here that I saw so much of the need for conservation. When I look back at my presidency and my legacy, domestically there's nothing more important than the 230 million acres of national parks and national forests, wildlife refuges, bird sanctuaries, and national monuments declared or legislated during the 7.5 years of my administration. And when I visit Theodore Roosevelt National Park, see these Badlands and the wildlife here preserved, well, it does my heart good.
Well, thank you, Mr. Roosevelt, for helping us on our adventure today to learn more about this park and about your influence and your significance here in North Dakota.
Fully indeed, Ranger. A delight to be with you today, and I wish you the best in your endeavors.
Will I ever see you again?
You'll see me. I'm everywhere around Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and maybe you'll see me in the sky and in the trees and in the wildlife here. I'll be thinking of you, and I hope that you and the visitors to the park will be thinking of me and be inspired to make this country a better place.
We certainly will. Thank you, Mr. Roosevelt.
Fully a pleasure, sir. You're welcome. I'll see you again.
Well, enjoy the rest of your book, Mr. Roosevelt. Oh, whoa. Wow, that was amazing. We got to explore a frontier cabin from the 1880s, visit a national park, and meet a former president. You know, something Theodore Roosevelt said at the end of our conversation really stuck with me about inspiring people to make the world a better place, setting an example for those that come after us. You know, today, Theodore Roosevelt is considered one of our greatest presidents, in large part because of the example he set for those that came after. You know, this national park is dedicated not only to the memory of Theodore Roosevelt, but to his legacy, his accomplishments as well. His time in North Dakota, the influence that he had on this state, the influence that the state had on him are a part of that legacy. He says he never would have been president if not for his time spent in North Dakota. So if it wasn't for this state, the world may have never known Theodore Roosevelt. And if it wasn't for Theodore Roosevelt, we might not have the special places that we have today. I hope you enjoyed our adventure today and had fun learning about Theodore Roosevelt, his contributions, and the national park created here in his honor. Just as Mr. Roosevelt would have wanted, this wild country is here for you to explore. And so I hope you come and visit the park to learn more about this fascinating place and the man that helped inspire. Let's start that over again.
The wild horses, the pronghorn sheep, pronghorn ants. All right, ready to go? We'll go down from 3, 2. Oh, I'm Theodore Roosevelt, and I approve this message.